If you own property in Seattle, there is a good chance you're putting a value on it based on rules that haven't even passed yet. Right now, about 30 new neighborhood centers were proposed this year, and not one of them is official. In this video, I'm going to break down what the City Council has passed, what is still sitting at City Hall, and how you should look at your lot under both plans. Over the past 30 years, I've lived here and sold real estate in Seattle long enough to watch the city go through rezoning before, so let's dive in. A 20-year growth plan sounds like something that gets filed away at City Hall and forgotten about, but that is not the case for this one. On December 16th, the City Council passed Council Bill 120985, and it took effect on January 21st, 2026. So this is the law today, and it's called, more commonly known, the One Seattle Plan. For years, Seattle pushed much of its growth into small areas called urban villages, while much of the rest of the city stayed the same. That approach is over. The city now wants more homes near transit, jobs, and daily services spread across more parts of Seattle. Affordability and long-term sustainability are also written into the plan. Now, this plan has had a rough road getting passed because the state wanted Seattle to finish it by December of 2024. The council did not approve it until a full year later. It took several committee meetings and 4 all-day public hearings to get there. 6 separate legal challenges were also filed against the plan, and in April, the city's hearing examiner dismissed every one of them. The real numbers around this are where the headlines start confusing people. You've probably seen reports saying the plan could lead to around 100,000 new homes. Seattle's assigned target for 2024 through 2044 is on the order of 80,000 housing units and roughly 159,000 jobs. Then you've got King County's own numbers saying Seattle needs closer to 112,000 net new homes during that same period. And finally, you have the capacity number, which is much bigger. If every eligible property were built out to the limit, the zoning under this plan could hold 330,000 new units. Those are 3 different numbers, and they don't mean the same thing. The target is the amount of growth the state and counties say that Seattle needs to plan for. Capacity is the amount of housing the zoning could allow if every eligible property were redeveloped to its maximum size. That's never going to happen, of course. Even before these changes, Seattle's existing zoning already had room for 167,000 homes, and of course they were never built. Zoning capacity on a city map doesn't mean that many homes will show up on your street. Now, you may be trying to picture how all of this looks on a real map with real buildings and real lots. We'll get there. Just remember, most of the maps being shared right now are not law. First, you need to understand what a comprehensive plan can and can't do. The plan gives the city direction. It lays out where Seattle wants housing, density, transportation, and infrastructure to grow over the next 20 years. The plan cannot approve a building. That still comes down to the zoning that has been enacted, the size and shape of your lot, trees on the property, utility access, and whether the project even makes financial sense. Now, the One Seattle plan comes in phases, and this is the most useful part for understanding what could happen to your property and when. Phase 1 is finished and already in effect. Phase 2 is a major rezoning proposal that everybody is debating right now. After that, the city plans to rezone existing regional and urban centers, including places like downtown, Northgate, and Capitol Hill. Then in 2027, another round of upzoning is expected near frequent transit stops under a separate state law, House Bill 1491. So you've got 4 waves under one larger plan, and right now, only the first one is in effect. One part of this process, though, has already moved beyond the planning stage. By the way, if you're interested in selling your home, feel free to use the free home valuation tool by scanning this QR code on screen. Now let's keep going. Our next topic, the permanent death of single-family exclusivity. Under Seattle's old code, the empty side yard next to a typical house could never hold another home, and that land was legally off limits, but it changed. Council Bill 120993 passed on the same day as the comprehensive plan. It's now Seattle's permanent response to Washington's statewide middle housing law, House Bill 1110. Seattle used to have 3 types of single-family zoning, NR1, NR2, NR3. The category depended on the size of the lot. Those 3 zones have now been combined into one category called neighborhood residential, and that one category covers roughly 3/4 of Seattle's residential land. The new density rule gives you more options than some of the headlines suggest. That's because it uses a formula instead of one fixed limit. Your lot qualifies for whichever of these 3 options gives you the highest number. or you can build one attached or detached home for every 1250 square feet of lot area, or you can build 4 homes no matter the size of the lot. You can actually build 6 homes if the property sits within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, or if 2 of those homes meet the city's affordability rules. With that in mind, let's run that formula on real Seattle lots. A standard 5,000 square foot lot qualifies for 4 homes. A 7,500 square foot lot qualifies for 6 based on the lot size alone. You don't even need to be near a transit stop. And then a 10,000 square foot lot qualifies for 8. And then you've got stack flats, which are homes built above or below one another. Those use a smaller ratio of 1 home for every 600 square feet of lot area, so the allowed unit count can climb much faster. That's a calculation most Seattle homeowners have never run on their own address. Then you've got floor area, which becomes very important once you start looking at what someone can actually build. The city connects your allowed building size to the number of homes you add. If you build at a lower density, your floor area ratio is 0.6. In the middle density, 0.8 to 1.0, and if you build at a density of 1 home for every 1,600 square feet or more, the ratio climbs to 1.6. So the code gives you building space. Stack flats at that density qualify for 1.8, and that can rise to 2.0 if you preserve a large tree. So the code gives you more building space when you add homes and you protect the tree canopy. Height limits went up too. Now the base height is 32 feet, but you may qualify for 42 feet if you meet just one of several conditions. That includes planting or preserving trees that cover 10% of the property once they mature. You can also qualify by keeping a tier 2 tree. Another option is building 3 or more main homes with a 20-foot front setback. Stack homes can also qualify if the property reaches the same green factor score. Don't assume 32 feet is the maximum until you've checked every option that applies to the lot. Now, before we get into backyard cottages, keep this in mind. There's an easy way to check what your own address qualifies for, and I'll walk you through that in a bit. Setbacks also got smaller, which changes how much can fit on the property. And once you build 3 or more homes, the front setback drops from 15 to 10 feet. The rear setback also drops from 15 to 10 feet, and if the back of your lot borders an alley, that is a moneymaker because that rear setback can drop to 0. Side setbacks average 5 feet with a minimum of 3 feet. Small lots in frequent transit areas can use a flat 3-foot side setback. Buildings can cover up to 50% of the lot, and you need at least 5 feet between separate buildings. Now, parking is where some property owners get surprised, and the base rule requires 1 parking space for every 2 homes, but no parking is required if the property sits within a half-mile walking distance of a major transit stop. And there's also no parking requirement for homes that are 1,200 square feet or smaller. Accessory homes don't require parking either. So a project with smaller homes near light rail could qualify with 0 parking spaces on a small Seattle lot. Removing those stalls can free up a major piece of the property. Backyard cottages will probably be the first change most people notice. A detached backyard cottage is called a dadu. An accessory home built onto or inside the main house is called an AADU. You can now have 2 accessory homes on one lot, with each one capped at 1,000 square feet. The state also removed the old rule requiring the property owner to live on site. The allowed height for these cottages increased from 18 feet to 32 feet in neighborhood residential zones. Now, accessory homes still count towards the property's density, floor area, and lot coverage, but they don't require parking or street improvements. And Seattle homeowners were already building these before the rules changed. So homeowners and builders have already shown there's demand. The new code just gives you more room to work with. Another change hasn't received much attention, which is you can now add up to 2,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space inside a neighborhood residential zone. That means corner stores are legal again inside residential blocks for the first time in generations. Over the next 10 years, that could change how some Seattle neighborhoods look and how residents handle daily errands. Lately, I've had Seattle property owners reaching out because they're not sure which of these zoning rules apply to their lot. If that sounds familiar, I'll check your address against rules that are active today and the changes that are still only proposed. Then I'll send you a free valuation showing what the property may support. My contact information is in the description below, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. All right, so those are the rules that apply to a Seattle lot today, and the larger changes getting most of the attention are tied to a map that the city hasn't finished yet. Let's talk about Mayor Wilson's Centers and Corridors proposal. That colorful map showing 6-story buildings across Seattle keeps getting shared online. The plan has been approved and zoning is pending. The mayor's office released an updated version of the proposal. It's called Centers and Corridors, and it makes up phase 2 of the One Seattle plan. The proposal was first developed under former Mayor Bruce Harrell. Mayor Katie Wilson's office has continued moving it forward. It would rezone the new neighborhood centers in places like Wedgwood, Ravenna, Bryant, and Maple Leaf. It would expand existing urban centers, including Greenwood, Upper Queen Anne, Morgan Junction, and the areas around Othello and Graham. And on top of all that, it would change the development rules inside Seattle's low-rise and mid-rise zones. So the city estimates that the 30 new neighborhood centers could hold roughly 30,000 homes. Added density along frequent transit routes could create room for another 37,000 or so. Inside the expanded urban centers, buildings could reach up to 8 stories, with even more height allowed near light rail stations. Along the transit corridors, the proposal calls for buildings up to 6 stories. Now, Mayor Wilson has another proposal on the early review process. It's informally being called Taller, Denser, Faster. That proposal would go further than the changes currently on the table. How these appeal fights play out this year will help decide how quickly that next plan can move forward. And supporting all that future housing will require better transit, and the money for those buses comes from a separate decision that's already sitting on your ballot. It's the 2026 Seattle Transit Measure. While everyone's arguing about 6-story buildings that haven't been built yet, meanwhile, the vote that helps decide whether the buses can support any of that growth is heading to the ballot this fall. So on July 21st, the City Council voted unanimously to send a transit funding renewal to city voters. So, on July 21st, the City Council voted unanimously to send a transit funding renewal to Seattle voters. The current measure passed in 2020 and expires in April of 2027, and this isn't a brand new tax showing up out of nowhere. The sales tax would increase from 0.15 to 0.30% for 10 years. That is double, and the city expects that to raise roughly $138 million each year. The current version brings in a little more than $50 million. Now, the service numbers are pretty clear. Seattle currently uses this money to buy about 180,000 bus trips each year. The new measure would fund about 280,000. The measure would also provide fully paid transit passes to another 12,000 residents. It would fund transit security officers, behavioral health specialists, and ADA accessibility improvements. Now, when it comes to costs, this is a sales tax, and that's what people are asking about. Seattle's Transportation Department estimates it would cost a 2-person household earning the median income about $58 per year. There is a real debate over the rate in committee, and one amendment would have lowered it from 0.30% to 0.225%. That amendment failed. For some history, about 80% of Seattle voters approved the current version back in 2020. Now, this transit funding is not legally connected to the zoning changes we just covered. Passing it would not rezone a single property, and the connection is that more frequent and reliable bus service makes it easier for people to live with fewer cars in the denser areas Seattle is planning around. Right now, the measure is still scheduled for the November 3rd ballot, but here's where the overlap matters for your property. So Seattle's zoning code gives some of its biggest benefits to lots near frequent transit. A property can qualify for 6 homes instead of 4 if it sits within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, and no parking is required within a half-mile walk of one. Small lots in frequent transit areas may also qualify for tighter setbacks. If bus service expands and more areas meet the city's frequent transit rules, more properties could qualify for those benefits. That's the funding piece behind the buses, and Seattle voters will still decide it in November. Now that we've covered the biggest parts of the plan, let's apply them to your own property. What is the wealth building strategy in this new Seattle? Clients who come out ahead on these zoning changes start with one step that most homeowners skip, and they look up their own address. So pull your property up using Seattle's official parcel lookup tool. Start with the zoning that applies to your lot under current law. That same map will show you 2 details that can change what the property supports. The first is whether your lot sits within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, and the second is whether any part of it falls inside an environmentally critical area. Then open the proposed One Seattle zoning layers and compare the same address against that map. While you're there, get the exact square footage of your lot. The density formula depends on that number. If your lot is under 5,000 square feet, the 4-home minimum will likely give you the higher count. Once you get above 7,500 square feet, the lot size formula starts allowing more than that minimum. That one measurement can tell you which density rule controls the property. Now, if your lot falls inside one of the proposed neighborhood centers, pay attention to where the boundary is drawn. Those centers generally cover about an 800-foot walk from a central intersection. That's around 3 or 4 minutes on foot. So remember when I said you need to value the property 2 separate ways? First, model what the lot can support today under the current neighborhood residential rules, then create a second model showing what it could support later if centers and corridors becomes law. Don't pay extra today for floors that the current zoning doesn't allow. Phase 2 is now looking at 2027 at the earliest, and the appeals still haven't been resolved. Any premium based on that future zoning carries more risk today than it did back in January. Then you've got subdivision, and this is where the financial side can change fast. Seattle won't allow you to create new independent lots smaller than 5,000 square feet, but unit lots work differently. Unit lots can be sold separately while remaining connected to the other homes on the property for redevelopment purposes, and there's no minimum lot size for them. So 4 homes built on one parcel could become 4 separately sellable addresses. A cottage can't be separated from the main house that way, so you need to account for that before choosing the project type. The Phase 2 proposal would also simplify some of the measurement rules inside low-rise and mid-rise zones. Fewer code conflicts could make parts of the permit process smoother over time, but a simpler rule on paper doesn't guarantee that every permit will move faster, and not every property benefits from these changes in the same way. A nice flat lot near transit with alley access gives you more options for cottages, stacked flats, or townhouses. A flat lot near transit with alley access gives you more options for cottages, stacked flats, or townhouses. A steep property covered by mature trees with a difficult driveway can face a much tighter set of choices. That difference is written into the code. If part of the property falls inside an environmentally critical area, the city reduces the allowed density and lot coverage based on how much land is affected. So a creek, wetland, or steep slope can directly reduce the amount you're allowed to build. An alley can work in your favor. If the rear property line borders one, the rear setback can drop to 0. The new rules create more possible outcomes, but they don't add the same value to every lot. That's where both the opportunity and the risk sit. So let's figure out which side your address falls on. Now, if you want to know which these rules apply to your address before the next phase moves forward, email me at hello@mwagnerteam.com. I'll go through your parcel with you line by line and show you what applies today, what still depends on a future vote. And if you own a downtown condo, a tall skinny townhome, or an older fixture that just isn't moving, watch the video I've linked here. It breaks down the 5 types of homes buyers are walking away from in 2026. Trust me, that's one you'll want to see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.